Painting your countertops, is it a good idea or a really, really bad one? Hey, it's Carrie from Lovely Etc. And today I want to talk all about one of my riskiest DIY projects that I've ever done, painting my laminate countertops. Today I'm going to talk about how I did it, how it turned out, how it's held up 7 years later, and whether I would do it again. So I have a full step-by-step tutorial over on my website, lovelyetc.com, and I'll put a link to it, that walks you all the way through the process of how I painted my countertops. But right now, I'll just give you a super quick and dirty version. So I started out with really ugly laminate countertops. Our kitchen was all around just very, very outdated, including the countertops, which were a white laminate with these gold squiggly lines that was very popular many decades ago, so they had to go. But fortunately and unfortunately, we have a really nice sized kitchen with a lot of countertops, which meant it would have been very expensive to actually replace them. And at the time, I just did not have that money in the budget. So I decided to attempt painting instead. Okay, so here's how I did it. I started by lightly sanding all my countertops to scuff them up to give the paint something to stick to, because laminate is very slick to begin with. Then I used an oil-based primer and rolled it on. Oil-based primer is always great if you really need something to adhere. Followed that by paint. I used white paint as a base coat and then added some accents in light gray to give more of a marbling effect. And then finally, the most important step of all, I sealed the whole thing with a pour-on high gloss sealer called Envirotex Light. And that was definitely the most important step of the entire process, because that sealer is what helped protect the paint finish so that it wouldn't flake off. It's what gave it a glossy finish like real countertops have. And it's honestly just what made the whole thing look really nice, like a real countertop, and not just like somebody rolled a paint roller right over their old counters, which is mostly what I did. Okay, so once I did all that, how did it actually look in real life? To be honest, I was truly surprised at how good it looked, and even friends and family, including people that are not known to sugarcoat things, said that it looked really good. And honestly, you would never guess that it was painted, and it looked just like a real countertop. That pour-on sealer that I mentioned, because it is thick and not just a really thin coat like a regular polyurethane, it gave it dimension and truly made it look like a real countertop surface. I don't know that I would go so far as to say it looked exactly like real marble or real stone, because there's just some kind of a quality to it that you can tell is something different. But it 100% didn't look like I had just painted old laminate countertops. And for just a couple $100, it was a huge improvement, especially when you compare it to how much it would have cost to actually replace the countertops. So it turned out really pretty darn amazing. I was super happy with it, and I definitely think that the risk paid off. And now here we are 7 years later. Now, when I first painted these countertops, I never in a million years dreamed that I would be using those same painted countertops for 7 years. In my mind, it was something that would hold us over for a year or two until we did a bigger renovation and had saved up some money. But once it was finished, and I'd also painted the cabinets and the backsplash and made a few other small changes, honestly, the kitchen looked good enough that I didn't feel the need for a huge gut renovation. And now we're actually getting ready to move to a new house. So this is going to be the final update of how the countertops are holding up. And also over on my website, I'm sharing updates on a lot of other projects and how they've lasted, including our painted kitchen cabinets and backsplash and a whole bunch of other stuff from our house, just how it's looking now and the good, the bad, and the ugly of all the projects. I see so many amazing DIY projects online, and they look fantastic and wonderful. And then I always think, but how's it going to last? How's it going to hold up? Is it really going to survive real life? And so I want to make sure to share not only how to do the project and how it looks when it first gets finished and is all, wow, amazing, but how it actually turned out over time. I have 3 kids, and they are not super easy on stuff. So if something survives here, I feel pretty confident recommending it to other people. Okay, so back to the countertops. It's now been 7 years since I first painted them. I'll go ahead and say that I've been pretty amazed at how well they've held up. But that does not mean that they still look perfect. They absolutely don't. So let me break down the good and the bad. First of all, they have held up amazingly well. 7 years later, I've had to touch up my painted cabinets twice during that time. I've had to touch up lots of painted furniture that I painted during that time. And that's just how paint goes. It doesn't last forever. There's always going to be tiny chips and imperfections, and if you want it to look perfect, you have to touch it up. Not so for my countertops. This sealer has worked amazingly, and it has really protected the countertops, and only recently have I started to see any chipping at all. And that has been some small chips right along the edge of the counter where you can see a little bit of the black edging from the original laminate countertops poking out. So that hasn't been great. I can't say exactly how long it was before that happened, but I'd say within the last 6 months to a year. As far as the surface of the countertops, it's held up really well. You can see some minor scratches along the surface where the light hits it. I'm okay with that. To me, that's not a big deal. I also have recently noticed there are just a few little spots that the finish is starting to become really dull. I'm pretty sure that that is the result of using a magic eraser to try to get some red juice that my kids had spilled on the countertop and left there, and then it made a stain. Trying to get that cleaned off, which it did come off, it left kind of a dull spot in the shiny finish, which again, when the light hits it, you can see. But none of that is a huge problem. In my opinion, the biggest issue with my countertops is that I painted them white, and over time the finish has definitely yellowed. It has kind of a distinct yellowish orangish undertone to it now, to the finish, and I don't think it would be that noticeable if I didn't also have white cabinets, white appliances, and a mostly white backsplash. Against all of that pure white, it really does stand out that it's somewhat yellowish. Now, it's not horrific by any means, but it is noticeable, and if you are kind of a perfectionist kind of person that wants things just so, which I typically am, then it is a little bit bothersome. I think if I had darker cabinets, or if I had painted the countertops a darker color, if anything was not just white, 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 then it wouldn't be so noticeable, but it is what it is. My kitchen was dark. I don't get a lot of natural light. I wanted to brighten it up, and here we are. I don't know exactly what caused the yellowing. I don't think that I did anything wrong. I think it's just part of what naturally can happen with the product. I'm assuming it was probably a reaction based on light and heat, because that's typically what causes yellowing over time. The area that is the most yellowed is the corner that's right next to our cooktop. So it really gets almost no natural light over there, and it's kind of tucked behind the cabinet, so even the overhead lights don't reach there as much, but it's right next to the cooktop, which makes me think heat probably had a major factor to play. Even so, overall, I am pretty thrilled with how my countertops look, especially considering how inexpensive they were and how many years they have lasted. 7 years. I mean, lots of not DIY, very expensive renovations are starting to show wear and tear after 7 years. So I'm pretty thrilled about that. I did, before we put our house on the market, do some touching up of those little areas where I said there was some chipping around the edges. I just mixed up some paint in a color that would match the now yellowish color of the countertops and used a tiny brush to touch in those areas, and then sealed it with a glossy sealer. I did not do the whole pour on thing again because these were tiny little areas. I just used a regular like polyacrylic. Which brings us to the final question. Would I do this again? Absolutely, yes, I would paint my countertops again. I would go into it knowing that this is probably not a forever solution, which I honestly never thought that it was. And if I was gonna do it again, I would experiment with some different colors other than white. I would use this sealer again if I were gonna do this project again. I might also see what else is out there. It's been 7 years. Paint and sealants are constantly improving, and there's a good chance that there's something even better on the market now. So I might look around, but I would definitely go for a pour-on sealer again because the finish and the durability has been absolutely amazing. If you have super ugly countertops, there's really not a lot to lose. Just give it a try. There's a good chance you're gonna love it, and there's a good chance that it's gonna last a lot longer than you ever would have imagined. If you haven't, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel, Lovely Etc., where I share lots of inexpensive ideas for creating a home that you love.